My daughter-in-law rewrote my eulogy while I was sleeping. Not after I died. Not after a diagnosis. While I was still breathing in the guest room. Across the hall from the living room, where she hosted a women's book club, and read aloud her version of my life. She titled it A Quiet Goodbye to a Complicated Soul. My name is Irene Blake. I'm 76 years old, and for 30 years I ran a photo studio in this small town. Blake's Studio. You probably walked past it, even if you never noticed me. I was the one behind the counter, fingers stained with developer whopping newborns' cheeks and wedding veils and military homecomings into neat little packages of permanence. Now my daughter-in-law has packaged me into a past tense, wrapped me in adjectives like proud, stoic, and difficult to reach emotionally. I wasn't supposed to hear it. She read it aloud for feedback during her Wednesday gathering. I was meant to be asleep, fed my night pills early by her, two white, one pink. I tucked the blanket tight under my arms and waited for the house to go still. But it didn't. Not that night. I didn't even mean to eavesdrop. I only got up because I had forgotten to unplug the old kettle. But when I heard my name followed by the phrase "lived in the past," I stood in the hallway, still and sharp as a negative strip dot. She was reading it from her phone. In that smooth, breathy voice she uses when she's being performative, Irene was many things, she began. A woman of her time, and sometimes behind it. A soft chuckle from one of the women followed. She struggled with change, Melissa continued, especially the kind that involved letting go, but in her own way, she cared. Another chuckle, a murmur of agreement. She took pictures, but she didn't want to be in them. She preserved everyone's memories, but refused to share her own. And then the line that made my legs go cold. She died how she lived quietly, stubbornly, and not quite understanding the world around her. I stood there with my hand on the banister. I waited for someone to say, "Wait, what do you mean died?" But no one did. They nodded. They sipped their glasses. They said things like, "That's beautiful," and so honest. I turned back to my room, heart tapping fast but steady. I didn't cry. I sat down, pulled the old metal box from under the bed, and opened it. Inside were things no one wanted anymore. Film rolls, envelopes with negatives, contact sheets with grease pencil circles. I took out a small notebook and turned to the page I'd once labeled "What If?" What if someone tried to erase you before you were gone? Melissa used to be polite, back when David first brought her home. She smiled too much, but I chalked it up to nerves. Then they had Zoe, and things began shifting small at first. Photos from our studio replaced by canvas prints she ordered online. Family gatherings moved from my house to theirs. Then the year David said, "Mom, maybe it's time you stop driving." It was all gradual, like fading light, but this wasn't subtle. I pretended to be groggy the next morning. Melissa brought me toast and half a banana like always. Her cheerful tone cracked just slightly when she asked how I slept. "Deep," I said. "Didn't hear a thing." She smiled, relieved. Later, while she ran errands, I unlocked the old darkroom. I kept it clean, even if I hadn't used it in years. The red light still worked. The trays were dusty, but usable. I turned on the faucet, let the water run. That afternoon, I developed the photos I had taken over the last few months quietly, with my old film camera. Not of people, of patterns, habits, Melissa in my room holding papers, David checking mail from her hands, Zoe watching from the stairs. There was one shot Melissa standing in the doorway of my room, holding up a folder with a smirk, the corner of a document visible, power of attorney. They thought I didn't notice things. That's the trick of age. People confuse slowness with blindness. I labeled each photo in pencil on the back, just one word: control, dismissal, performance. And then I reached for the envelope marked already filed. A few years ago, I had written my own eulogy. I had it notarized at the courthouse. I filed a copy with the church, and one stayed with me, sealed. I wrote it not because I thought death was near, but because I didn't trust other people to tell the truth about my life. I pulled it out now and reread it. My name is Irene Blake. I lived simply. I gave people back their memories. I didn't ask for much. I believed in fixing things, in holding on, even when everyone else let go. No embellishments, no apologies, just me. I photocopied it, folded it neatly, put it in an envelope with the church's return address. Then I wrote a note to Pastor Riley. "If Melissa Blake sends you anything regarding my passing, please disregard. I am not dead. I am simply watching." That night, I left the envelope in the church mailbox. I walked the long way home. The lights in the house were off. Melissa must have thought I was asleep. I stepped carefully past the guest room mirror. For a second, I looked at myself, not the ghost they were painting me as, but a woman in full exposure, sharp, intentional, developing. I didn't need to rush. Let them plan their performance. Let them rehearse the obituary. I still held the negatives. And soon, I'd show the town the real picture. I found my obituary in the church bulletin before breakfast. It was printed neatly on page 4, wedged between a bake sale announcement and a reminder to bring canned goods. In loving memory of Irene M. Blake, 1948 to 2025. No photo, just a paragraph that read like a character assassination in past tense. She never liked crowds, but we're grateful she had a quiet final chapter under the care of her devoted family. Though her memory faded in her last years, she still managed a smile. I didn't smile when I read it. I felt my stomach twist, slow and sharp, like a camera reel catching fire under the bulb. I tore the page out and folded it into quarters. Melissa had stopped printing it at home, I see. Better to tuck it into something as respectable as a church bulletin, less traceable. She wanted to erase me softly, not with a bang, but with curated grace. At 7:45 sharp, she knocked with her usual chirp. "Good morning, Irene. Time for your meds." I didn't answer. She let herself in, all brisk and cheerful. When she saw the paper on my lap, her voice dipped to sugar. "Oh, that's nothing. Just a draft the church printed by mistake. You know how scatterbrained Marla is." I didn't blink. "They used my middle initial. You're the only one who knows that." Her smile thinned but stayed. "I must have submitted something old when we were organizing your documents. Remember?" I remembered. That was the same week she came in with color-coded folders and told me she was helping me get things in order. That week, David asked if I'd considered scaling down, and Melissa changed all the pharmacy notifications to her email. I folded the page slower this time. "If you're submitting things with my name on them, I'd like to see the drafts." She reached for the pill organizer on the tray. "Let's get these down before your eggs get cold." I took the pills. I didn't swallow. That night, after Megan left and the house went quiet, I spit them into a tissue and flushed. I waited for the pipes to stop gurgling before pulling the folder out from beneath the floorboard. Inside, a copy of my real will, the eulogy I'd written myself, and the negatives Melissa had tried to throw away when she digitized my life. I knew then I had 2 weeks, maybe less, before she moved on to the next phase. The trial run, funeral. 2 days later, Pastor Riley dropped by, not out of concern, out of obligation. "Melissa said you'd like to finalize the service plan in advance," he said, stepping gingerly over photo boxes stacked in the foyer. "She's very thoughtful." I poured him tea without sugar. "Did she also tell you I died last Tuesday?" His cheeks flushed. "Oh well, we do pre-need planning sometimes, just for peace of mind." I watched his hands. They trembled slightly as he unfolded a typed sheet. "She said these were your words." They weren't. The document he held described someone unfamiliar. Though she struggled with modern times, she remained gentle. She found comfort in the care of family. She spent her final years in stillness. It read like a review, from someone who'd skimmed the summary but skipped the whole film. I walked to the cabinet and pulled out the original. 4 pages, typed on my old Royal typewriter. Precise, spare, clear. I handed it to him. "If anything happens to me, this is what you read, not hers." He took it without argument, tucked it not into his folder but his inside jacket pocket. That told me he knew, not everything, but enough. He looked at me as he left. "You know," he said, "I baptized Zoe right in this living room." I nodded. "She screamed like hell in that lace bonnet Melissa made her wear." He chuckled. I didn't. That night, I catalogued every photo Melissa had touched. She'd done a purge last spring, claiming she was decluttering, said she scanned the important ones, but what she actually did was choose. She chose shots where I looked, small, confused, peripheral, images that said, "Here is a woman already halfway gone." She framed them neatly, lined the hallway with them, made them look like nostalgia when they were really a slow erasure. But she'd made one mistake. Film negatives don't lie. In the back of my closet, I kept a shoebox labeled expired. Inside, old rolls I'd meant to toss but never did. Some were fogged beyond use, but 3 survived. Zoe's first birthday, Christmas '94, the 4th of July when David cried because I cut his hot dog wrong. I spent 2 nights in the basement under the red light, breathing chemicals, watching the truth reappear in silver grains. I clipped the wet strips to the line. Images slid into place. Zoe, grinning, mid-cake. David on my lap. Melissa in the background, frowning, arms crossed. I made prints, not big, just enough. And I waited. Sunday came, and with it, Melissa's latest invention, a living tribute tea. She invited Pastor Riley, 2 neighbors, and Zoe. Said it was not a funeral, just a chance to appreciate while you're still with us. A soft launch. She meant. I wore my navy cardigan and slipped a small envelope into my sleeve. Zoe arrived last, taller now, pale, sharp, quiet. She nodded at me but didn't speak. Melissa draped her arm around Zoe's shoulders like a prize she'd won. The pastor began the prayer. Melissa stood just behind him, eyes glassy, the perfect actress. Lord, we thank you for the quiet dignity of a life well lived. I raised my hand. I have something to share. Melissa's smile froze. Mom, maybe after, but Riley stepped aside. I walked to the coffee table, laid the photos down one by one. This is my memory, not hers. They leaned forward. One by one, they saw laughter, mess, warmth. No edits. Melissa reached forward. There's no need to confuse people with you already did. I turned to Zoe. You were happy. They just didn't let you remember. Zoe picked up the birthday print, her voice barely above a whisper. I've never seen this. Melissa's voice sharpened. They're old. They don't matter now, Riley said quietly. They do. They always did. David stood in the corner, silent, watching like a man seeing something through glass. I faced them all. She rewrote my ending. I'm writing it back. I handed out copies of my original eulogy, not folded, not hidden, just truth, plain and sharp. Melissa tried to gather the photos. I stopped her. You don't get to crop me out. And for the first time in years, the room was I was the center of it again. I knew she was gearing up for something bigger. When she asked for my mother's pearls, Melissa came in holding a clipboard and a fake smile. Pastor Riley said you might want to include something sentimental for ... later, she said. She didn't say for the funeral, but she didn't have to. I stared at her for a beat too long, then got up without a word and opened the locked drawer. Under the stairs, inside was a velvet pouch, untouched for 30 years. I handed it to her. She didn't say thank you, just ticked something off her list and moved on. That same afternoon, a man from Everlight Memorials came by to measure the viewing room. Melissa hovered by his side, pretending to consult me. Don't you think a photo board would be nice, Irene? Something cheerful, maybe pink. The man smiled too wide and scribbled on his form. We'll keep it tasteful. They weren't planning my departure. They were planning my absence. I let them, because while Melissa staged her tribute, I staged something better. I pulled Zoe aside before dinner. She was scrolling on her phone, seated on the porch swing, distant and pale like a ghost in training. I sat next to her. Do you remember the lake house? Summer of 2012. She didn't look up vaguely. I handed her a small envelope. Inside, 3 photos, one of her covered in mud, laughing. One of David pushing her on a tire swing. One of me, holding her towel with my hair half wet. Your mom said those were ruined, but film doesn't lie. I just had to wait for the right bath to bring them back. Zoe's eyes flickered, her fingers trembled slightly. Why are you showing me these? Because you don't look like someone who wants to forget, I said. And I don't look like someone who's already gone. She didn't reply, but she didn't give the photos back either. That night, Megan lingered in the hallway after helping me into bed. You're skipping your pills again, she whispered. I didn't answer. She looked down. I'm not supposed to say anything, but if you're planning something, do it soon. They've scheduled a preview with the videographer next Thursday. Melissa wants a rehearsal reel for a funeral that hadn't happened yet. I waited until the house emptied the next morning. Then I crept into Melissa's study. Her laptop was password protected, but the photo scanner wasn't. On her desk were freshly printed shots of me, gray, slouched, unsmiling, all in black and white, all cropped too close. A narrative told through absence. But in the recycling bin underneath, I found a glimmer. 3 color prints she'd tossed aside. In one, I was laughing. In another, Megan and I were organizing albums. In the third, Zoe was kissing my cheek. None of them fit Melissa's story. I took them back. That night, I printed my own montage, not just of me, but of everything she tried to crop: faces, noise, movement, mistakes, the kinds of photos that lived. I glued them onto a board I found in the garage, wrote one line at the top: not yet. Then I slid the board under my bed. 3 days later, Melissa invited her sorority friend, now an end-of-life social media consultant. The woman filmed the house. "We want to tell Irene's story," she said, "but like the elevated version, quiet dignity, floral palette, maybe some B-roll of her combing her hair." Melissa nodded like a director. I sat in the kitchen and stirred my tea. Slowly. Zoe passed by and caught my eye. Just for a second. The next morning, Zoe knocked on my door. She entered quietly and handed me a flash drive. I hacked Mom's cloud. She's been working on a launch page. Scheduled post for the day after. Well, you know, I plugged it into my old laptop. There it was, a video trailer, a soft piano score, clips of me cropped down to shadows, Melissa's voice narrating. She was quiet, gentle, and ready to go. "We celebrate the peace she found with us." My hand clenched the mouse. I clicked pause. "She's got sponsors," Zoe said. "A floral brand, a grief coaching platform. She's tagging everything #Final Moments series." They weren't just staging my death, they were monetizing it. I looked up. "Will you help me record something?" Zoe nodded. We filmed it in the darkroom. My voice, my words, no music, no polish. Just me, holding the real photos, holding the eulogy I wrote myself. I said what needed saying, not angry, not pitiful, just ... true. Zoe uploaded it and set it to unlisted. And we waited. Thursday arrived. The day of the rehearsal. A mock service with pre-arranged guests, camera crew, and even catering. Melissa wore navy, David wore gilt. Pastor Riley stood at the podium with a folder of her script. They dimmed the lights. Before the video could play, Zoe walked up to the screen. "I want to show something else first." Melissa hissed, "Zoe, this isn't the plan." But Zoe had already hit play. My voice filled the room. Not the quiet, sanitized version, the real one, the one she couldn't crop. Melissa lunged for the laptop. Pastor Riley blocked her. "Let it play." And it did. All 7 minutes. When it ended, no one clapped. But no one looked at Melissa either. They looked at me. I stood from the front pew, walked up to the board I'd hidden behind the flowers, uncovered it. "Not yet." I turned to Melissa. "You wanted a preview. There it is." She tried to speak. "COULDN. Single quotes T. Zoe stepped beside me, and just like that, Melissa's version was gone, and mine had begun. I noticed the new medicine bottles. The morning after the tribute tea, they sat on my bedside table with printed labels meant to look official. Next of kin approval. I recognized the pharmacy handwriting from last week when they changed all alerts to Melissa's email. I took the bottles downstairs and left them on the kitchen counter. She saw them and swallowed hard. She asked if I could switch to the weekly organizer. I agreed to delay. I didn't open a single pill pack. Megan was there later that day, sorting the pill organizers and marking her log. I thanked her for keeping track, and she said, quietly, "I know what you're doing." She didn't elaborate, just glanced toward the hall. Something in her eyes shifted. Awareness, maybe fear. I knew then Megan had that file of recordings tucked in her bag. I spent the afternoon downstairs, rifling through the cabinets. I needed stamps. I found a stack of unopened envelopes addressed to the church. The lawyer, a local TV producer Melissa, had invited to stream the tribute video. Each envelope contained my typed eulogy, bound with a paperclip and postmarked months earlier. I slid them into my old coat pocket and placed the empty envelopes back. She overheard me humming while washing dishes. She came behind me with a box of family photographs. "These have to go," she said. "People are questioning the authenticity of some prints." I pulled back slightly. She meant the tabloid rumor about strange aging spots on prints that made headlines last month. She offered to throw them away. I said no, calmly. I carried the box upstairs and labeled it, "Samples, do not delete." I watched her face when I shut the door gently behind me. That evening, she sat next to me with her phone hovering over my shoulder, a feed of comments praising her tribute post. "Look how many shares," she said. "Your story is helping thousands." I pretended to read the comments, but I was tracking something else. The timestamp on one top comment that said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. That comment had been posted 30 minutes before lunch. Melissa had preloaded grief from strangers, fabricated. I scrolled down a reply. Live stream 10 a.m. Saturday. Please join. The live event had been scheduled before I arrived here, before the tribute even made sense. I wrote the times into my notebook. 3 p.m. for rehearsal reel, 10 a.m. for go live. I left it open on the counter. When they asked why, I said I might interview local news after. They didn't ask further. I pulled the old Canon from the closet the next morning, took it upstairs. Zoe found me fixing the strap. She didn't say anything. I loaded film, 3 frames, one of Melissa posing with the pastor, another of David standing by the urn display in the foyer, and one of me, looking directly into the lens while they arranged. People behind me. I snapped the shots quietly, sliding the camera back under the bed when I finished. That afternoon, Megan knocked before entering. She handed me a note folded in a pink envelope. Her handwriting. Be careful. Tonight they'll review slides and finalize video sequence. Don't let them go without one. I folded it and tucked it into my cardigan. The next morning, I took the stack of faded glassine envelopes from the closet. Inside was a large roll of negatives, labeled Public Archive. Some were from community events, parades, local protests. Others were off-limits. Images of Melissa deleting negatives from the backlog last spring. Images of David signing papers. Scenes of the Preservation Committee rejecting my proposals to digitize decades-old negatives. I loaded them onto a scanner at the studio and exported them. Data labeled and sorted. I drank my tea in the darkroom that evening. The red light faint. I clipped negatives to the drying line. A continuous string. Faces of friends I once printed. 4. Children I held in frames. Mothers crying over lost spouses. Community volunteers. Nothing polished. Just memory, grain, truth. On Saturday morning, I entered the parish hall before anyone else. They set up video equipment. Bright fluorescent lights. Folding chairs in neat rows. Floral arrangements where the photo board should go. I carried my camera prints and a wooden board covered in old snapshots, the ones Melissa had erased from corridors. I placed them at the edge of the dais, behind the podium. I stood quietly in the back. The room filled. Neighbors whispered. Zoe slipped in beside me. I nodded. Riley took his place on stage. Melissa glimmered in her navy dress, poised to speak. She opened with, "We gather not because Irene has left us, but because she is choosing to rest." Soft laughter. People nodded. The tech crew adjusted cameras. Then Pastor Riley paused mid-sentence, glanced down, and pulled out something from his pocket. My original eulogy. He cleared his throat. "Today," he said, voice shaking, "I have 2 versions here. And one is hers, and the other. Irene submitted months ago." Melissa's jaw tightened. She looked at me with fear. The pastor started reading, and his voice became steady. Every sentence crisp, unflinching. When he finished, he paused, held eye contact with me. He motioned to Zoe, who stepped forward, connected the flash drive I'd given her, and pressed play. My voice filled the hall. No softness, no filter. Declaration that I was alive and observant. Timeline details of every meeting we'd had, every draft she'd shown, names, dates, photos, statements, not a confession, but undeniable accounting. She tried to interrupt. David stood blankly. Riley signaled silence. My montage appeared on the big screen. Photos from the board behind the dais came to life on video. Film negatives, color prints, the camera shots I'd hidden. The audience leaned forward. Melissa's smile collapsed. She whispered, "Turn it off." Riley looked at her, then at me, then back at the screen. He shook his head gently. "Let it run." When it ended, the silence was deafening. No applause, no camera flashes, just faces registering truth. People shifting in their seats. Zoe reached for my hand. I felt reassurance in her gentle squeeze. They dismissed the event. No tribute video, no live stream, no pre-scheduled surge of sympathy. Only me, collecting my photos and old negatives. Riley approached and offered his arm to lead us out. Outside on the steps, neighbors lingered. A woman I hadn't seen in 20 years said, "I'm sorry." Others murmured support. They looked at Melissa but saw through the performance. Melissa left with her clipboard in hand. I stood with Zoe, holding the wooden board. I looked at her, whispering, "Not yet." She nodded. We walked home slowly, together, but not behind her. The printer jammed twice that morning. I took it as a sign, but I unjammed it anyway. The pages that came out were clean, crisp, and full of names I hadn't seen in years. Beneficiaries, policy numbers, account transfers. I clipped them together and tucked them between the pages of an old cookbook Melissa never touched. No one noticed that Melissa had scheduled what she called a quiet rehearsal for Saturday's Memorial Dry Run. A photographer was coming, not from the town paper but someone she found online who specialized in empathy reels. I was to sit still, dressed in soft gray, and nod graciously at lines I hadn't written. David no longer looked me in the eye. Every morning, he set my tea down silently. Every evening, he read over printed emails, most with legal headers, some from clinics I'd never visited. I watched him sign too. She never let him keep a copy. Zoe, on the other hand, had changed. She didn't say much, but she began leaving the kitchen light on after midnight. One morning, I found a half-drunk mug of cocoa on the table, right next to my old Canon, AE1. The lens cap had been removed. Megan came by for her routine check, blood pressure, pill count, notes, but she lingered this time. She stood by the door of my duck room. "They think the camera's just for nostalgia," she said. "They don't know you still develop by hand." I said nothing. She pressed a key into my palm, her locker at the hospital. "In case you need a duplicate of anything that's already been erased," she said. "Just don't tell me when." The rest of the house moved as if I weren't there. Melissa invited Riley over that Thursday. They rehearsed my tribute in low voices, testing tone, phrase, and image. Words like grace, decline, release. Words that sound gentle until you realize they're meant to erase you. Once they left, I rewound the baby monitor I'd hidden behind the bookshelf. The audio was clear. I clipped it to a reel of slides I'd been restoring, portraits from the 1995 community fair. Melissa was in one of them. She used to smile, with her teeth back then. Friday night, I found the hard drive. Melissa had left her laptop open, uploading a folder titled Final Montage, thumbnail after thumbnail, my face. In some, I was lying in a hospital bed I'd never seen. In others, I was smiling weakly at a bedside where no one had ever sat. Most were composited from stock footage. I copied everything. I didn't sleep. I printed photo after photo, matte 4x6 prints with real film grain. On the back, I clipped the original negatives and scribbled the date, location, and who had taken it. Often me. By sunrise, the table was full of proof. Not just of life, but of truth. Saturday arrived. They dressed me in beige. Melissa said it softened my features. I smiled. Megan showed up early, helped me carry a locked box to the church. She didn't ask what was inside. The rehearsal was theater. Zoe opened the door. Melissa rearranged lilies. David sat in the third pew, fingers pressed to his temples. The photographer circled me like I was already gone. Riley approached the pulpit, cleared his throat, began reading, words from Melissa's script, cherry-picked, overly tender, heavily managed, sentences that smoothed out my years into shapeless platitudes. The crowd, carefully curated, nodded along. Then the lights dimmed. The projector stuttered. A second feed connected. On screen a new reel began. My voice filled the room, not frail, not passive, clear, controlled. Images followed, not the polished photos Melissa had prepared, but real ones, from family road trips, grocery store aisles, birthday disasters, 4th of Julys with melted cake. I was always there in the middle, not the margin. Melissa turned pale. Then, documents, scanned policy forms, signed transfers, notes in David's handwriting, audio clips, whispers, deals, dates. A short clip of Melissa in the living room, rehearsing my eulogy while laughing into her wine. I narrated every slide calmly. Each one corresponded to a date, a choice, a distortion. The final frame, me in the darkroom, holding my original eulogy, date stamped. Smiling, silence. Melissa rose, lunging toward the projector. Zoe stepped in front of her. "You said transparency," she said, "so here it is." Melissa froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. David didn't move. He just stared at the screen, then at me. Riley stepped away from the pulpit and handed me the mic. I didn't raise my voice. "I'm not gone," I said, "and I don't need to be rewritten." No one clapped, but no one stopped me either. I walked out the center aisle with Megan beside me, the box in my hands. Outside, the light was too bright but honest. The envelope was sealed with masking tape, 2 layers, yellowed at the edges. I hadn't touched it in nearly 20 years. It was labeled in my handwriting, "Do not develop. 2005 to 2010. and buried behind the old enlarger in the far corner of the darkroom. I'd nearly forgotten it, but Megan had helped me move a few things that morning, and there it was, like a relic, or a trigger. I slid the negatives out carefully, holding each strip up to the light. Zoe's kindergarten recital, David's 40th birthday, Melissa at the store counter, asking me to smile, and one I didn't remember taking Melissa standing in the hallway, holding the envelope with my bank statements, eyes scanning quickly, face unreadable. She never knew I caught that moment on film. I locked the door behind me and sat on the old stool in the dark room. No red light, just silence. Then I began printing, one by one, grain by grain, memories returning, not ones she curated, but the ones I had quietly preserved. No edits, no captions, no filters. She thought I deleted everything when I shut down the studio. She forgot I never threw anything away, not the old receipts, not the proof sheets, not the life that was mine before she started telling it for me. That night, David knocked softly on my door. "We need to talk about the house." I let him in. He didn't sit. "Melissa says it's time we consider ... assisted living. Something closer to town. With supervision. With cameras," I said. He blinked. "I'm not a liability, David. I pay the taxes on this place. I'm not the one draining accounts under someone else's name." His jaw tensed. "That's a serious accusation. So is writing a eulogy for someone who's not dead." He looked down, then back up, but not into my eyes. "We thought it would ... help us prepare. Emotionally. It's not what you think. You printed programs, David. You made RSVP links. What do you think it is?" He didn't answer. He left the room slower than he entered, but just as spineless. When the front door clicked shut, I went back to the dark room. I printed 2 more photos. Then I wrote a name on the back of each. One said Megan, the other said Zoe. Megan came by the next afternoon with soup. I gestured to the dining table. "I have a question, Megan. Did Melissa ask you to log my medication hours?" She hesitated. "I'm your nurse, Mrs. Blake. I keep records. Did she ask for access?" Another pause. I handed her the photograph. It showed Melissa by the kitchen drawer, a phone pointed at my pill organizer, time-stamped. Megan stared at it. She said it was for refills. She said quietly, "I don't refill my meds, Megan. You do." She took a breath. "You're going to need someone to testify." "I'm not going to court," I said. "I'm going to the church." I asked to meet Reverend Riley privately. He looked nervous when I showed up with a manila envelope and asked for the room where grief support meetings were usually held. "I'm not here for counseling," I said, "but I'd like to hold a session of truth." He scanned the first photo, then the next, then the typed copy of the eulogy Melissa wrote and distributed. "Irene, this is inappropriate. These are accusations. I can't get involved in family legal issues." "I'm not asking you to be a judge," I said. "I'm asking you to be a witness, a real one." For once, he looked pained, but he folded the envelope, tucked it into his desk drawer, and nodded. I left without a handshake. Later that evening, Zoe came to my room. Not a knock, just a quiet creak as the door opened. "Mom said you're selling the house," she said. Double quotes. "No. She said that." I figured. She looked at the wall of old photographs, framed, dusty, untouched, for years. "Do you hate her?" she asked. "No," I said. "I remember her when she was kind. Or maybe I remember wanting her to be." Zoe sat. "You know she's turning the service into a live stream." I paused. "Say that again." "She's filming it. As a tribute, celebrating your legacy. #ready." I overheard her rehearsing. That was the moment the last piece clicked. I opened the drawer and pulled out the old camcorder. The one David used to film our road trip in '97. I handed it to her. "Want to help me record a different kind of tribute?" She smiled for the first time in months. Zoe helped me digitize the photos I developed and overlaid them with voice memos I'd recorded, dates, names, context. Megan quietly dropped off old financial statements from the months Melissa had logged into my banking app. And Reverend Riley, after a week of silence, emailed me back. "If you speak, I'll make sure they listen." I didn't need a lawyer. I needed a lens. On the Sunday before the scheduled service, I asked Zoe to invite her mother for tea. Melissa arrived in beige linen and false affection. She sat primly on the edge of the couch, legs crossed. She didn't see the small camera on the bookshelf blinking. "I wanted to thank you," I said, "for for organizing everything, for making me visible again. She smiled like it's been hard, but I knew you'd appreciate the sentiment. You always were good with stories, I said. Like the one you told the insurance agent about my fall. Her smile faltered. What? Irene. David's voice rang from the hallway. He looked alarmed. What's going on? Just showing Melissa some family footage. I said. Zoe entered. She had the iPad. She tapped play. The screen filled with unedited moments. Melissa removing cash from my wallet. Melissa editing a will document on her laptop. Melissa rehearsing a eulogy into her phone. Irene was a woman of grace, even as her memory faded. David went pale. Melissa stood. This is manipulated. It's not, Zoe said. I helped her. It's all raw files, time-stamped. Megan stepped in from the kitchen. And I have records to back it up. Melissa's voice dropped an octave. You're destroying this family. No, I said. You rewrote a legacy that wasn't yours. I'm just putting it back. She turned to David, but he didn't meet her eyes. You said she didn't. No, he whispered. I lied, I said simply. She stormed out. I turned to Zoe. The funeral's in 6 days. She asked, you still want to go? Yes, I said, but not as a guest. She grinned. I looked at the wall of old photos. Some of them had started to fade, but the negatives, they were intact, unbent, untouched. I wasn't dead, but I had been erased. And now, I was developing the truth frame by frame. The morning the pamphlets arrived, I knew Melissa had crossed a threshold she couldn't return from. Megan brought them in, a slim cream box wrapped in navy twine. She set it gently on the kitchen table and stepped back like it might bite. It's not from the pharmacy, she said. No return address. I slid the ribbon off, lifted the lid. The smell of fresh ink hit me first. Then, I saw the cover, a blurred photo of me from behind, sitting alone on a bench in our backyard, the title printed in elegant serif, A Celebration of Life, Irene Blake. I flipped it open. On the first page was a quote I never said. A life quietly lived is a legacy loud in love. Then came a timeline: birth, marriage, motherhood, milestones flattened into neat little bullets. And then, the eulogy, the same one Melissa had read aloud in that mock practice months ago. The one that painted me as a fragile relic who'd spent her last years grateful for the simple things and ready to pass the torch. She'd even included a QR code leading to a tribute video. Is this, Megan asked, an invitation, I said, to my own funeral? But it wasn't just a pamphlet. It was a campaign. The front of the box held a sticky note in Melissa's handwriting. David will handle distribution to church. I've scheduled posts for Thursday. Zoe approved the caption. I closed the box slowly. Would you mind bringing me the old projector from the attic? Megan looked surprised but nodded. Sure. The next day, Melissa floated into the house like she was entering a showroom. I brought you something, she said, placing a glossy gift bag on the counter. I didn't touch it. It's a cashmere wrap. I thought you'd want to look elegant for Sunday. I turned toward her. What's happening Sunday? She blinked. Your service, Irene. Just a gathering, light lunch. Pastor Riley will say a few words. Is what symbolic? Symbolic, I repeated. I know it's unconventional, but people love the concept of a living eulogy. I think it'll be really healing for Zoe. Closure, you know. Do I get to speak? Melissa hesitated. Well, we thought it might be better if it came from people who loved you. Past tense. She smiled like she'd just offered me a warm cup of tea. You just enjoy it, okay? I nodded. I will. That night, Megan helped me install the projector in the darkroom. We hung a sheet across the far wall. I gave her 3 film reels to digitize. No labels, no previews. Irene, she said, her voice low. Are you sure about this? Yes, but I won't need it until Sunday. Can you have it cued and ready by noon? She nodded. You really were a genius at this. I watched one. The birthday party. Zoe was what, 5? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By Friday, Melissa had posted a video montage. It was overproduced, filled with royalty-free piano music and sepia-toned photos of me looking confused or frail. One showed me asleep in a chair with a crossword on my lap, captioned, "A mind once sharp, now resting." She tagged everyone in town, Pastor Riley, her yoga group, even the community theater board. Zoe didn't share it. On Saturday, David stopped by. He looked exhausted, like he'd been pulled along in Melissa's slipstream too long. She said, "You're okay with all this?" He mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I am, I said. I just had one request. What? I want to watch the video with everyone. He looked startled. Melissa said you didn't want to speak. I don't. I just want to watch. He nodded, relieved. Okay, I'll tell her. Sunday arrived like a stage cue. Guests trickled into the church hall, not a sanctuary, just the multi-purpose room Melissa had rented for the occasion. Long tables with white cloths, mason jars of baby's breath, soft jazz humming in the background. The pamphlets sat neatly at each seat. That Zoe arrived late. She wore black but didn't sit with her parents. I caught her eye. She didn't smile. Pastor Riley opened with a gentle welcome. We're gathered today in gratitude. Irene Blake is still with us, and she's asked to listen, not speak. What a grace that is. Melissa stood next. She held a wireless mic like a TED Talk speaker. We don't say thank you enough, she began. Irene taught me what patience looks like, what dignity sounds like. I remember the first time I helped her with her medication. I tuned out. I watched the screen at the front of the room. Megan stood in the back, one hand on the laptop. At the final word of Melissa's speech, Megan clicked play. The screen flickered. Then, my living room, 3 months ago. Audio crystal clear. Melissa's voice. If we don't announce it soon, the insurance policy won't pay out. David, she's still alive. Melissa, barely. And if she gets worse, there won't be time to clean things up. We need to move. Then, her at the kitchen table, forging my signature on the amended will. Then, her rehearsing the eulogy into her phone, editing phrases like graceful descent and quiet surrender. Gasps rose. A chair scraped. Pastor Riley stood, visibly shaken. What is this? Melissa rushed forward, face pale. This is a violation. This is. Zoe stood up. No, this is truth. Melissa turned to her. You said you wanted this? I didn't say I wanted a lie. People began murmuring. Some stood to leave. Others stared at Melissa like she was a stranger. I walked slowly to the front. No microphone, no speech. I reached for the projector's off switch and held it in silence. The screen went black. Then, I turned to Melissa. You planned my funeral, I said. I planned the playback. She stared at me, frozen. I'm not leaving this town, or this family, but you are leaving the story. David opened his mouth, closed it again. I turned to Pastor Riley. Will you help me record an official statement? He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Zoe came toward me. Her hands trembled, but she didn't cry. I'm sorry, she said. I know, I replied. Outside, the air smelled like autumn. Inside, no. One picked up the pamphlets. The church doors were left ajar. I watched from the passenger seat as Melissa paced the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing at the flower delivery truck. 2 young men, unloaded vases, too large for any funeral I'd ever attended. Calla lilies, pure white, stacked like accusations. David stayed in the driver's seat, fiddling with the radio dial like silence couldn't bear to sit between us. You want to go in? He asked finally. I'll wait here. He nodded, not because he understood, but because it was easier than arguing. Inside that church, Melissa had orchestrated what she called a soft farewell. She insisted it wasn't a funeral. It was a life celebration, a term she used to distract from the fact that I wasn't dead. Her voice carried from the nav. She was walking the event planner through lighting cues. A slideshow would play behind the altar, a pre-recorded reading of Psalm 23, a short video of me saying goodbye, lifted from an old home video when I had the flu and no voice. She'd adjusted the saturation and added soft piano music. I had watched the edit once, with Megan, from the laptop in my room. We didn't speak during it, but at the end, Megan turned to me and said, "That's not your voice." I said, "No, it isn't." By noon, the first guests arrived. Not for me, but for the image of me Melissa had created. Photos lined the entrance. Me holding baby Zoe, me waving beside David at his graduation, me in the studio, cropped carefully so the camera covered half my face. All of them had been filtered to match her theme. Warm light, no shadows. I slipped inside through the side door near the choir loft. No one noticed. I found a seat near the back, next to the exit. Megan had wheeled me in and quietly disappeared. From this angle, I could see it all. Melissa stood near the front, radiant in navy, greeting guests like a widow. Her hand stayed close to David's elbow. She gave Zoe air kisses and asked her to stay off her phone. Zoe sat 2 rows from the front, head down, earphones in. The slideshow began. The room dimmed. Faces around me tilted upward, lit by flickering images. There I was again, younger, smiling, nodding in slow motion. A voiceover began, Melissa's, breathy and solemn. She was a quiet strength in our lives. She paused for effect, but we never really knew her. I leaned forward. She lived among negatives. Melissa continued, processing the past, never the future. Gasps, not loud, but real. She taught us how to frame things, how to crop the chaos. But she couldn't see the bigger picture. That's why we must let go with grace. She was fading long before her final breath. A man near the front wiped his eye. I saw Zoe shift. She pulled out one earbud. Her face was blank. Not surprised. Just still. Melissa ended with a sigh. She gave us memories. Now, let's give her peace. The lights rose. There was polite clapping. A few women sniffled. I stood. At first, no one noticed. Then Zoe did. Her head whipped around. She stood too. Melissa was halfway through hugging someone when she saw us both. She froze. I saw her mouth form one word. No. But she didn't move. Not fast enough. Zoe stepped into the aisle. I followed her lead, walking toward the pulpit. Heads turned. Murmurs rose. I reached the base of the altar and looked up. Excuse me, I said, voice steady. I'd like to say a few words. Melissa recovered quickly. Mom, let's not. Zoe interrupted. Let her speak. Melissa hissed something at David. He didn't respond. I turned to the guests. I appreciate you all coming, but I didn't die. Not yet. A ripple moved through the pews. I read the eulogy. I've seen the slideshow. That's not me. A woman in the third row murmured, but we got the letter. You did, I said. Melissa sent it, without my knowledge, without my consent. Melissa stepped forward. She's confused. You all know how hard this year's been. I raised my hand. I'm not confused. I've been watching, listening, and documenting. At that cue, the projector behind the altar flickered. New footage began. Not the filtered slideshow, but raw clips. Melissa holding forged documents. Melissa speaking into the camera, rehearsing different versions of her speech. Melissa on a call with an insurance agent, asking when policy changes would take effect if a doctor declared me mentally declining. Then footage of my room, Melissa checking drawers, David signing papers without reading them. The room went silent. Then came the final video. Zoe's phone, secretly recording a conversation from last week. Melissa, if we wait too long, she might change the will. Zoe, you mean you might not get to post about it. Melissa, this isn't about likes. Zoe, it's about legacy. Zoe, then why does it feel like a trailer? The video ended. No one spoke. No one clapped. Melissa didn't move. Her face drained of color. I stepped closer. This church, I said, held my wedding, my son's baptism. I donated the camera for the youth choir. I developed film for this community for 30 years. I pointed to the slideshow remote on the pulpit. You can crop me out of your version of events. But I kept the negatives. Zoe walked up beside me. She didn't take my hand, but she stood there, solid. Megan emerged from the side hallway, carrying an old photo album. She handed it to me. I opened it and placed it on the altar. Inside were the original prints, unedited, unfiltered, with timestamps and captions in my handwriting. The guests approached slowly, one by one, flipping through the pages. Some nodded, some avoided my gaze, but they all looked. Melissa left before the last page turned. No goodbye, no statement. David stayed seated, face in hands. I didn't follow them. That evening, I sat in the darkroom, watching film develop. The images floated into focus, messy, imperfect, but real. Zoe came in without knocking. She pulled up a stool beside me. Did you know, she asked, that she was preparing a funeral? Yes, that she'd post it as a memory montage before I died. No. She smiled faintly. It hit 1 million views. I'm not surprised. She was quiet. Then she asked, are you going to sue them? No, why not? Because some things don't need courts. They need witnesses. She nodded slowly, eyes on the drying prints. What now? I shrugged. I keep printing you. She hesitated, then said, maybe I stop filtering. I didn't say anything. I just handed her a fresh roll of film. Then start here. She took it, carefully. Behind us, the red light glowed. The room smelled like developer and old silver, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel erased. I felt focused. Melissa wanted a funeral, so I gave her one. She sent out glossy invitations that read like an awards gala, honoring a life of quiet strength. Irene Blake. There were hashtags, RSVP links, even a press photographer from the local paper. She staged it in the church, of course, with white lilies, soft jazz, and a photo slideshow looping through smiling faces, most of them mine, none recent, none real. David stood by her side, pale and uncertain. Zoe hovered in the back, earbuds in, unreadable. Megan wheeled me in just as Melissa stepped up to the podium. Her silk dress caught the light like a spotlight was made for her. Today, we remember Irene Blake, she began. A woman, a few words, and fading memories. I stood. There was an audible shift. A few people gasped. One camera clicked. I'm sorry, I said, my voice clear, steady, but I believe I'm still here. The silence turned thick. Melissa blinked twice. Lips parted. Zoe pulled out her earbuds. Pastor Riley, from the side aisle, removed his glasses. You're not scheduled to speak. Melissa hissed. No, I replied, stepping away from the wheelchair Megan had only pushed for show. But I believe I was scheduled to be buried, alive, and I'd like to opt out. I turned toward the crowd. My name is Irene Blake. I ran a photo studio in this town for 30 years. Some of you brought your children to me. Some of you brought your weddings, your memories. I developed them, carefully, faithfully. That was my job. Behind me, Megan connected the projector to a small laptop. The screen flickered. I've been unwell, yes, but not the way you were told. A video started playing, grainy footage, but clear enough. Melissa rifling through documents in my bedroom. Melissa practicing my eulogy aloud on a video call. Melissa talking to her lawyer about estate transfers. Melissa staging shots of my final weeks while I sat doped on over-the-counter sedatives she insisted were just vitamins. Then came audio, her voice, unmistakable, saying, she doesn't even know what day it is. By the time this goes through, she won't remember anything. The church stayed frozen. Melissa lurched toward the projector, but Zoe was faster. She stepped between them, eyes locked on her mother. Don't, she said quietly. Melissa faltered. David looked like he might faint. I walked forward, toward Pastor Riley. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about record-keeping. He nodded once, and gestured toward the pulpit. I stepped up. My legs shook once, not from weakness, but from the weight of what this moment meant. I looked out over the pews. Melissa rewrote my eulogy, but I had already filed one, legally, with a notary, 3 years ago, before any of this. Would you like to hear what it said? I opened the envelope Megan handed me. It said, Irene Blake, born 1949, lived quietly, loved precisely, believed that memory is a sacred act, survived by her son David, who she forgave, and by those who remembered her rightly. Zoe blinked fast. David stared down at his hands. Melissa was already edging toward the door, but I wasn't done. I won't press charges, not because there wasn't a crime, but because what I want isn't a courtroom. I pulled out a second envelope. This is a formal request to the Community Archive Committee. It contains one instruction. Remove Melissa Blake from all family records, all public-facing dedications, all donations made in my name. Someone gasped. She tried to erase me. So I'm erasing her, not from cruelty, but from continuity, because memory, real memory, is what we owe each other. The crowd stayed silent. Then Pastor Riley walked over and took the envelope. Zoe stepped forward and placed a photo on the altar, a real one, me, holding her as a baby, eyes squinted against the sun. I developed that myself, I said softly. She nodded. I know. Melissa was gone before the final hymn. David stayed, behind, dazed and mumbling. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. The loss would find him without my help. After the service, people approached, quietly. One man pressed my hand and whispered, I forgot what your laugh sounded like. I'm sorry. Another woman offered, I brought all my film to you. You made my daughter's wedding look like magic. I just smiled. I didn't need thanks. I needed the silence to speak differently now. Later, at home, I walked into the dark room one last time. Inside were photos I'd kept hidden for months, not of myself, but of Melissa's deceit. Megan helped me document everything. My ex-husband Harold, who I hadn't seen in 20 years, mailed the originals from a P.O. box in Michigan. I didn't know he still had those negatives. I didn't know he still remembered me kindly. I did not file lawsuits. I didn't sell the story. I donated the photos to the local archive, time-stamped, sealed, labeled, for truth, in case of doubt. Then I locked the darkroom and left it closed. I am not a ghost. I am not a prop in someone else's narrative. And now I'll tell you why. For a long time, I believed that being quiet was the same as being respected. That if I stayed out of the way, stayed kind, stayed small, my place in the family would remain intact. I thought memory would defend me, that the people I loved would remember who I really was, without me having to remind them. I was wrong. People forget you in pieces. First your preferences, then your presence, then your purpose. If you're not careful, one day you'll wake up and realize they've already held your funeral, and you weren't even invited. I don't hate Melissa. Hate would give her too much power. What I feel is something colder, sharper. I see her clearly now, and that's enough. Here's what I learned. You don't need to win in court. You need to win in record. You don't need to fight fire with fire. Fight it with film, with facts, with evidence no one can crop or filter or spin. You deserve to be remembered accurately, and if they won't do it for you, do it yourself. That's not pride. That's self-defense. To anyone watching this who feels invisible in their own family, you're not. Keep the receipts. Keep your voice. Keep your version. Because one day, you may need to print it. And when you do, make sure the ink is permanent. Thank you for sitting through all parts of this quiet storm. If you found something in here that felt true, I hope you'll stay with me for the next story. It won't be loud, but it will be real, and sometimes that's more than enough.